to be eligible. And at that point, we would be asking for enough money to give them a portion of the increase, and then your higher performers would get the full increase. So everybody who made it would get something.
Well, I think that we try and budget enough money so that in a tiered system.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that, you know, I'm sorry,
I'm just trying.
I'm trying to.
No, I got
Yeah, I know, I realize I paused again.
Well, I'm sorry.
And I know you're, I know you're trying to.
I hate dead air, so.
Well, I know, you probably should have been in radio then. You've interrupted me and I lost my train of thought.
Oh, sorry.
Well, actually, I was formulating a thought.
I don't
You
even
interrupted
understand
me.
what we're talking about, honestly, because
Well,
this document was handed to us again right before we started discussing it. It's hard to read it and digest it all while everyone's talking. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure out. You're surprised at the number of people. I mean, everyone knew what the scale was, right? And surprisingly, everyone doubled the number of people that this time qualified for merit increases, if I read this correctly, doubled what your projections were. And you even rounded them up from 12 to 15 last year. But don't you think that everyone, all the directors knew that in order to get a merit increase, people would have to achieve a certain score? I mean, isn't that really what the problem is that everybody knew what the benchmark was, and the system kind of got tweaked a little bit so that people that the directors might like could also qualify for that? I mean, is that how the evaluations work?
I just see that, it goes back to what I talked about before, trust in the system. You have to trust your directors to do the job they're tasked with. It sounds as though you don't, but I think the majority of the council would say that they do trust the directors and the city administrator to govern that process.
Anytime something's over, excuse me, anytime something's over 100%, 100%, I mean, when something's wrong by 127%,
Well,
then that's a problem.
There's two pieces to that. What we've never had in the past is actually a merit pool, where we've said, here is a system in place to recognize the job well done and reward you for that. We put that system in place. It's inevitable that people are going to work harder when they actually have a finish line to reach towards. And heaven forbid they actually are working to that level of excellence. Isn't that what we would ask of them? I mean, I'm sorry that we had the problem of too many people qualified, but if my director can look me in the eye and say, this person certainly qualified for the 2.76, perhaps they even judged lower, I haven't had anyone come to me and say that they actually were judged too high.
And here's
no one's come to me and said, Keith, you know what, I really was a 2.74, but thankfully I got the 2.78 in the bonus because my director likes me. That's a made-up conversation because you don't trust the system.
Well, it's funny because when we first talked about PIP last year, I made the comments, what happens if we run out of money? And you said it would be a good problem to have, but in a sense, it's not a good problem to have, because when you say that an individual is eligible for a merit increase, but there's not the funds to fund it, it creates animosity. And it's not meant to be that way, but it does, because individuals think that they deserve something that they don't get, and that's where the problem arises.
Which provides us the opportunity this evening.
If we tier it, we can maybe address that.
To increase the funding amount and tier the system, so.
And I believe the city administrator also might have some ideas about other forms of employee recognition.
Right, I think that as we continue to look at high performance, there's obviously the merit component, there's tiering, but there are also opportunities for this organization, and obviously we're not going to consider that tonight, but there's opportunities to look at perhaps a bonus for, certain things, spot bonuses, which is also something that local governments use when they're looking at high performance organizations. So we have options to really look at that. If you tier it, you can certainly reach a broader pool of people.
Stretch your money.
Tiering allows you to stretch your money. Now, on the flip side of that, someone who may not score 5 on a 5-point scale may say, well, I didn't get the full amount. Well, it's the difference between 90, 80, 70. You start to look at, if you score 90, what would you like for staff to be allocating? If they scored 80, what would you like? And how far would you like staff to go down on those scores?
Well, if we're talking merit,
Right.
you know, and if you wanna take it into to something that the layman would understand simply, you know, a work gets you rewarded
At the highest level.
generally.
Yeah, but there's definitely a need to, obviously, there's a subjective component because you've got directors and managers, you know, doing the reviews. There's always gonna be that, but I think we need to try to make this as empirical as possible, first of all. And second of all, I think what we need to do is, as you progress to a higher performing organization, you continually raise the bar on performance expectations. So, you know, I don't see us going backwards on setting thresholds or making it a lower threshold to qualify. I think, you know, we need to increase that threshold, to a certain extent, or at least keep it where it's at, you know, because if you don't, then you send, I think, the wrong message to your employees that, you know, a lower level of performance somehow is sufficient for qualification for merit. Merit should be merit. I mean, you know, when you are going to college and you are in an honors program, you know, you have to hit a certain expectation for summa cum laude or magna cum laude. I mean, they don't, you know, make a change to that. It's an empirical measurement. And I think that's where we need to get with regard to the expectation for merit. You have to be empirical about it.
Well, and I kinda wonder if maybe a good way to tier it would be, if we were talking about 4.6
4.6
being the number, so you tier it at 4.75 and you take it down to 4.5. That gets you to 90%, that gets you the A-quality work. Now, somebody can suggest something different, but they're nice round numbers, and it's rewarding maybe another person or two, but I think it's easy to explain a work to associates inside the city organization.
I think, and Steve made, I think, we've only done this once, so you absolutely have to learn from it. And Steve pointed out one of the errors that we made is we just did not budget enough money, and that created animosity because people that qualified by the standard fell victim to the second qualification, which was budgetary constraints. So whatever we put in place this year, we need to make sure that we have the budget tools in place for the understanding that we will make the adjustments as necessary in order to fund this completely. Because you can't have that second tier, because when you have to move the number, then you automatically cut somebody's legs off because they reached what they thought was their goal and weren't able to receive the rewards for doing that. I know Christie had her hand up. I keep cutting in. I apologize.
No, I guess, I kind of look at this a little bit different in that, I mean, even in the business world, you don't have you have a certain set of money, right? You have a certain amount of money, and I personally believe that I don't want necessarily my rating tied to whether you have money to give me or not. So if I'm a high performer, I don't want to be somewhat less just because you feel you don't have the money. So I almost feel like we should come up with an amount that fits within our budget, and I don't understand this need to publish, cut and dry what that is, because quite frankly, if you're a good employee, if you're a high performing employee, you're gonna perform no matter what. And I mean, if you're not, because you don't think you get to a point where if you rate less, you should be managed out of the organization. And so to me, I almost feel like we should say, hey, listen, $100,000, and I'm not saying that's the number, but here's the amount that we're willing to give from a merit perspective, and then once everybody does the reviews, I mean, then you come back and you say, hey, this allows us, and I think we all agree that we'd like to tier it and be able to give, whatever that cutoff is, but I think we're getting hung up on, we want to be able to tell them exactly what they're going to get, and I just don't think that's the right answer. And then you kind of take out some of the animosity, I think, that Larry's talking about, whether I agree with that or not, but